So just to kind of give you an idea of the structure, I'm going to talk for about kind of 10 to 15 minutes about some research about eldership and the work that I've done. And then we're going to go into breakout groups and have a chat about it. So we are, and some of you may not belong to the community, but we are a community that's interested in eldership, and it's a free community. So we'll put some details on there if you are not a member and you want to be part of it. But we're on an exploratory, basically. We're on a bit of an adventure together, trying to explore eldership. So we're going to be talking about, kind of, like I said, some of the things that I've already kind of done, the work that I've done on it and the work that I do on it. But just to kind of give you an idea as well, we're going to be, when we go into our groups, we will be kind of chatting about what you are aware of around eldership for yourself. So I won't go into the questions now, we'll give you those questions as you go into your groups. So it is much more, for me, this is much less about me and more about the community and bringing people together. And it's amazing that we've got 27 people here on a Wednesday lunchtime, so that's fabulous. In terms of confidentiality and care, the most important thing for us as a community is we are on a vulnerable journey here to eldership. So it's important to respect and honour that. And that it does feel vulnerable at times, as all transitionary places do. And so we just want to respect confidentiality and anything that's kind of discussed. And I will leave it up to you to discuss anything that you feel you want to discuss with each other. But there is absolutely no pressure to do any sharing whatsoever. If you just kind of want to sit and share kind of how you've experienced what we've talked about and not go into any personal details, that's absolutely fine. So I'm trusting you all to hold that space for each other, particularly in those breakout rooms. And if there's anything afterwards that you feel like you want to reach out to me and talk to me about, then please do that as well. Please don't feel like you are on this journey alone, because you're not. That's the whole point of the community. So if there's anything that gets triggered, or anything where you feel like you've been left in a place that feels uncomfortable for you, that you can't work out through your own processes, then please feel free to reach out to me after the session as well. So let me start by asking you a question. How many days do you think you have left on this earth?
Days.
Now, I know you might not be able to tell us what that might be, but if you think about the average age in the Western world of living is 79, and you work out how old you are now, it kind of gives you a sense of how long you might have left. But what I want you to do is think about that in terms of days, not years. So how many days do you think you may have left if you're fortunate enough to live to 79? So first of all, work that out. Work out what you think that might be. So it may come as a huge surprise to all of you, but I'm actually 53. So I worked out that my days are 9,490 left. And that's a bit of a leveler when you think that, when you start counting in days, because suddenly for me, when I kind of thought about it this way, the days became much more important, and where I spent my time, who I spent my time with, what I did work-wise, how much time I spent with family and so on, was a real leveler for me. So it kind of makes you focus your mind about the present moment for me. But since the age of 30, some of you have probably read some of this that I've put out already on this, but since the age of 30 was when I first kind of came across this idea of life passages and rites of passage. And that was as a result of a number of disruptive events that happened to me in my personal life and my work life as well, actually. And I started to kind of tune into this transitionary process. And some kind person handed me the book from William Bridges, and it was on transitions, and it was a game changer for me. in terms of realizing that there was this space called a liminal space that we go into when we go through a rite of passage as we grow up. And that was missing, certainly in my world. It was very missing. So what I also want to bring to you is the work of Gail Sheehey. And she wrote a book in the 70s now on passages. And again, it was a huge piece of research she did, and she's American based. So it was an American based piece of research around kinds of passages of life and what happened in each passage, and also what happened in generations as well. And I managed to get hold of this book in my early 30s. So I suddenly kind of went down the deep rabbit hole, exploring kind of what happens in different passages of life as well. So not just looking at what was going on for me in my 30s at the time, but also kind of looking at other passages. And I started to recognize that maybe some of the passages that in my earlier existence, I perhaps hadn't got through as well as I was led to believe maybe I had. So in what Gail Sheehey realized, and again, she wrote the book because she'd actually been a reporter and had experienced somebody being shot dead in front of her. And so it was kind of a massive trauma that had kind of catapulted her into looking at life in a very different way. And I suppose brought her into her own mortality, which is obviously one of the things that when we get to midlife, suddenly we start to kind of focus on. So what I want to do now is just share with you one of the Can everybody see that?
Yep.
So you should see a map. And so she wrote another book about midlife, and she called it The New Map of Adult Life. And she mapped this out in a book, and it's quite a substantial book, the New Passage book. But it was based on the research of people who were actually in midlife, and it was quite a substantial piece of research. And one particular quote I just wanted to share with you that was in the book that really kind of hit me was, as part of her research, was kind of getting groups of people of middle age together and talking to them about life generally and where they were in life and how they felt about it. And she says, and she's talking about this particular guy, he knotted his arms more tightly around his chest, his body language signifying the self-imposed bind of a man still traveling with the old maps. He knotted his arms more tightly around his chest, his body language signifying the self-imposed bind of a man still traveling with the old maps. And it really kind of focused my attention around maps. And you can see from this, it's kind of giving you an idea of what the journey is through adult life. But one of the things subsequently I've realized is that she doesn't mention anything particularly about eldership. She calls it kind of second adulthood. So she groups it all together from being 45 to 85. And also you can see like these little bridges and rocky mountains all the way through as well. And I just also wanted to bring to your attention, which I think is quite interesting, because I think there's a lot of joking around this, but I think for me it's absolutely true. Is it mentions menopause, which is obviously a big thing that we talk about from females' perspective, but actually in there she discovered there was a male menopause. It was a stage in life. It probably happens in the 50s rather than the 40s, but it's actually a thing, and she actually named it. And yet we don't really talk about it, or we don't talk about the research that she kind of brought into that. But in the 50s as well, there was like a meaning crisis and a birthing of the second adulthood, which for me is kind of the preliminary into elderhood. One of the things that she doesn't really talk about is the this concept of the transitionary thing. So fortunately, I'd read William Bridges' work before I read this particular book. So it started to kind of piece together like a jigsaw puzzle for me. But essentially, one of the things that is important is this concept of a rite of passage, and that's not really what she talks about particularly or focuses on in the book. And the rite of passage, according to William Ayot in his book, Re-Enchanting the Forest, A Rite of Passage. So that's a book by William Ayot called Re-Enchanting the Forest, which is all about rites of passages. He says, one of the core rituals of humankind is rites of passage. One of the core rituals of humankind. It's practically universal in tribal societies and is largely absent now in our culture, to our great loss. So a rite of passage is a conscious shift to a new stage of life, a conscious shift. It involves process working with what needs to be left behind, so old wounds, unresolved endings, what needs to be remembered, and what may need to be sacrificed in order to move to the next stage of life. And rites of passages are carried out by trusted elders through ritual and ceremony. So being in a rite of passage means us entering a liminal space. And in our Western world, we have lost our elders who would be our guides through this unknown territory. So part of my, my passion is that we are those guides. If we can navigate ourselves through that passage well, then we are potentially those guides and those potential elders. I think when you think about kind of a guide, you're thinking about the likes of Mount Everest, and you certainly wouldn't try and climb Mount Everest without those trusted guides, those people who knew and who know what the territory looks like, what the dangers are, what to avoid, and so on. So it's kind of thinking about it in those terms. That's the guide. But one of the things that we're doing is, of course, is guiding people through liminal space. And that liminal space is different for every single individual. And I think that's one of the things we find difficult with rites of passage. It's not something we can tell people what to do. For those people who don't know about what liminal space is, it's from the Latin word limen, which means threshold. And in Richard Rohr's book, Adam's Return, he talks about liminality is an inner state and sometimes an outer situation where people can begin to think and act in genuinely new ways. It's when we are betwixt and between, have left one room but not yet entered the next room. Any hiatus between stages of life, stages of faith, jobs, loves, or relationships. It is that grace time when we are not certain or in control, when something genuinely new happens. We are empty, receptive, an erased tablet, waiting for the new words. Nothing fresh or creative will normally happen when we are inside our self-constructed comfort zone. Only more of the same. Nothing original emerges from it's just business as usual. Liminal space is the ultimate teachable space. It will almost always feel counterintuitive, like a waste of time, and not logical or rational at all. In fact, it must break your sense of practicality and function and move you into the non-functional world for a time. In liminal space, we choose the chaos of the unconscious over the control of explanations and answers. And people have to be taught and guided in how to live in such an uneasy place. So that's from the book Adam's Return by Richard Rohr. So, elders are indeed a rare find. So the other work that's been done on eldership particularly is by a guy called Bill Plotkin. And he talks about, so his book's called Nature and the Human Soul. And he talks about elderhood, and he actually has a map to elderhood in his book. And he says it's worth noting that the majority of people in Western societies have not gone beyond this stage, which is adolescence. And so true adulthood or psychological maturity has become an uncommon achievement. and genuine elderhood nearly non-existent. And for me, it feels so important to recognise that that we are missing the elders. And although being part of this eldership community, we could maybe like to think of ourselves as elders, genuinely, we're probably not. We are, but perhaps we can be do the work to get onto that path and go through that passage for ourselves. I love Carl Jung's quote about middle age, and he says, "Wholly unprepared, we embark upon the second half of life. Worse still, we take this step with a false assumption that our truths and ideals will serve us. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the programme of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be little in the evening. And what in the morning was true, the evening have become a lie." So in short, we've lived in the previous stages of life in survival. So let me just show you this model. So you should see a model now that says the missing piece. Everybody see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
So this is the model that I've kind of developed for myself around the rites of passage to eldership. And for me, it's about the ancestral piece. So thinking about where do you actually come from? So as an elder, one of the things we're doing is we're holding that passage of time between the past and the emerging future, the present and the emerging future. And that's not just about kind of knowing your past in terms of knowing who your elders are in terms of their names, what they did for a living, where they lived. This is about understanding your ancestry in terms of understanding their stories. What was the history of the people that went before you? And ideally, we're looking at 7 generations back, but it's just as far back as you can get to. And thinking about who or what's been excluded from the system itself, from the family system that you came from, what the traumas may be that you know or don't know, you've heard or have not heard. What are the secrets and the shame that's been hidden, and what happened particularly in the wars? What happened to your family in the wars? So this is some of the work we have to do in eldership. We have to go back and do this work for ourselves and find out who we truly are versus what the stories, maybe the family myths that we've been told, or the stories that have been told around it that may be more acceptable stories. So there's always trauma and secrets in our system. And you might think to yourself, we can't find those things, but there are processes that you can use to actually discover them. And then we get a different view maybe of who we are as a person in terms of our identity. Our identity is less dependent as an elder on what socially people think about us. Doing the work in eldership is very much a counter-intuitive, counter-social place. It's not what society is expecting of you. It's expecting you to just get old. It's not necessarily to get wise or become an elder, because you're going to be countercultural when you are. You will be going beyond the systems that are operating from the social world's point of view. And what are some of the things that you're looking for in terms of identity is thinking about what are maybe some of the entanglements that you're carrying from your ancestral system or from your own personal stories? What are some of the hidden patterns that you might be looking out for? And what's the story that you've either created for yourself or may have been created for you by your parents? What are the traumas that you may have experienced that maybe you've not looked at? And where are you stuck? And what are the many systems that you've belonged to in terms of school, places where you've been local to, organisations, job roles, professions. So it's starting to explore all those different systems that you belong to and what you've taken from those systems and where you actually belonged. And also, I think crucially, where may you have left your heart? Where maybe are those places you've left your heart behind that you may need to go back and retrieve and remember back in. And then when we look at soul purpose, which is talking about what does my heart long for, we're looking at things like values and what are our personal guiding principles and what myths and stories speak to our soul. What may be the archetypes in that? And a very important part of elders is community. You almost can't be an elder without community. So you need community. You need to be in community. And of course, the community must recognize you as an elder. But I'm calling this kind of an eldership niche. So I'm kind of modernizing this concept of eldership into a niche that goes, what are you an authority on based on your history, your ancestry, where you've come from, where you've belonged? What are you an authority on? What would people search you out for? What would you be known for? So it's starting to get some clarity around that and being really clear about what your philosophy in life is. What's your philosophy on life? What's your point of view? And where do you feel called to show up? And if you're thinking about a specific community, try and narrow that down even further into who in that community. Would it be the teenagers? Would it be the mothers? Would it be the fathers? So that's kind of just giving you a flavour of the rite of passage that we would go through to get to our eldership, and even the starting point for a lot of us into kind of our, maybe going back over some of the ground that we've those rites of passages that maybe we didn't actually pass through as well as we could have done. So therefore we may not have all the resources or capacity that we need to move forward. So this is a kind of some of the preliminaries that we'd go through to step into that role as elders. But what I want to do now is put you into some breakout rooms. And let me just share with you the questions that I'm going to ask you. So you should see what it says in terms of breakout rooms. So thinking about who were the elders in your life, if you know elders in your life, and they may not be in your family, but they may be people that you've come across, they may be mentors that you've had. What challenges do you think you may encounter on the passage to eldership, or you may be encountering now even? And what do you need to let go of or sacrifice as part of this rite of passage? And what part of you will need maybe to be rediscovered? So what part of you maybe you will need to rediscover? Now, these are big questions, so I'm certainly not expecting you to, answer these questions in 10 minutes. These are questions maybe for you to take away as well and reflect and ponder on as well. And it's really just a prompt for you when you go into your breakout rooms to have some time and framework to chat about things. But if you get called as a group to chat about something else, then please feel free to just follow the flow of what's emerging. You're certainly not going to be asked to come back and report back, specifically on what you talked about, unless you wanted to share anything with the main group. So what's most important is that you just get the opportunity to chat together about that. So if you haven't written down these questions, you might want to screenshot them or take a photograph of them, so to take into your breakout rooms as well before I take this off the screen. Okay. So Jan, can we go into breakout rooms now?
In me, so that intergenerational passing of information or knowledge through your ancestors. So understanding that responsibility and carrying that forward, I thought was a really interesting idea. And this idea that eldership is not really talked about much or shaped or discussed in society. So I think there is a huge responsibility that goes with it. And I think personally, some of my senior members of my family just don't live up to my expectation, to be honest. So there's some qualifying that needs to go on, perhaps, to earn that role. And it's obviously not self-appointed, but I think it comes from community and responsibility. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thanks, Al, for sharing that. Does anybody else wanted to?
Can I say something, Zena? It's Arnie here. It was a completely random connection, I think, between who I was with in the room, but it was actually quite inspirational and quite formative. And I won't say anything more about that, but it just shows how connections can really matter. And if you're in the right place with the right mind space in the right time, all possibilities can open up. And it was just fantastic. So thank you for that opportunity.
That's lovely. Thanks, Annie. Anybody else?
Oh. Zena, just
Yes,
a quick one. I've had the feeling that we are the elders, we are the ancestors, and the eldership aspect and the wonderful platform you provided is this framework to bring this through.
Thanks, June. Yes. Yeah.
Zena, just a quick one. I just wanted to touch base. One of the things that came up in our conversation was about not kind of creating barriers towards eldership in terms of age, or, some people say, oh no, you can't be an elder until whatever. And actually in these times we're at, with just so kind of chaotic and fast-paced changing, I think it's, and Jan will know this as well from conversations that she's been involved with me, is actually owning that part of us. Can we be responsible for becoming that elder as we move through? And obviously, what do we need to do? But really, thank you guys for platform, and yeah, really awesome to see everybody here.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Okay, let's wrap this up, because hopefully we will all meet again soon. So just so you know, I'll send out kind of dates to everybody, but this is going to be like the last Wednesday of every month. We're going to do the same sort of thing. So I'll just kind of bring topics to discuss, and we will kind of do this similar format again. So, and if you need to leave now, please do so. While we're just kind of closing, please feel free to do that if you need somewhere else to go. So that's what we're going to do. If you're not in the community, then by all means kind of drop me a line so that we can include you in the community. It is free, and we are meeting up in this way. We're also doing face-to-face as well, 4 times a year, so I'll kind of let you know about that as well. So if people want to meet face-to-face, that's what we're doing. So this is just creating a hub, if you like, for all those people who are on that journey or exploring it and so on. And I just finally, before we go, I just also wanted to flag up, me and Jan had a really interesting conversation with each other, and just acknowledging that this is a Western view. Most of the research that I certainly come across is westernized, and there will be other cultures will have their views on it. So please feel free to bring that into this community, this is for you to bring, because we don't just want a Western view of it. We want a much more higher sense of kind of what eldership is as human beings, really. So if anybody's got anything they want to contribute from their own cultures, from their own backgrounds, please feel free to do so. And it would be lovely to kind of share that on this platform as well. So thank you so much for coming. It's been absolutely lovely to see you all, and I wish you well for the next month, and do stay in touch. And if there's anything you're interested in finding out more, let me know. And also have a great lunch if you've not had your lunch yet. See you later.
Thanks, Zena.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Zena. That was great. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Zena. Hi, Joan.